go. So welcome to Kinspiration. We are so happy to have all of you here. This has been something, as a team began planning this, we talked about the importance of this work and keeping families together, ensuring that children are placed with relatives and kin. And we wanted to acknowledge a few things. So this change will only happen with the change makers on board, and you all are here, either in person or virtually. So thank you all for being here. We can support change by making an effort to align how we practice the values of family preservation, support, and stability. We recognize that you guys do your best to keep kids at home with their caregivers. And while sometimes that's not possible, when those situations do occur, we can prioritize kinship placements because we know that doing so can improve the outcomes for children and families. We know that Wisconsin children who are initially placed with relatives are more likely to be placed with their siblings. Placements there are more stable and they have higher rates of legal permanence. Today's Kin-Spiration event is designed to impact the hearts and minds of through power of lived experience storytelling, inspiring professionals to embrace kinship care as a transformative approach to putting families first. So what is DCF doing to support this statement? Well, we're here partnering with Think of Us to provide 5 regional events over a 1-week period of time. We want to inform as many child welfare professionals as possible. These events are free. They're at hopefully convenient locations, chosen in an effort to allow more in-person participation, and most importantly, learning from persons with lived experience who have been impacted by the child welfare system. We've had some recent wins, right? So thanks to the 2023 Wisconsin Act 119, more families now qualify as like kin, allowing more children to stay with people who know and love them. With the approval from the governor to update Chapter 56, we're able to create separate licensing track for relatives and like kin to ensure that they have the support and stability that they need by expediting licensing and ensuring equal financial support, removing barriers to placement. We're also focused on reducing disruptions. Let's keep kids with the people that they know and shifting our mindset to truly ask, what does this specific child need to thrive in this specific home? This is a big step towards honoring the unique strengths of kinship families. And finally, something new that none of you have heard about yet, we're excited to share an upcoming statewide initiative called the First Placement Project. This is a bold new effort to increase the likelihood that children are placed with relatives or like kin from day one. The goal is to carry the energy of Kinspiration forward to real, sustained practice change rooted in Wisconsin's ongoing policy shifts. This project will invite local agencies that are interested in participating to test and implement new ways of prioritizing relatives and like kin at the very first placement. Why? Well, we know that what research tells us, and most importantly, we've seen what happens when kids stay connected to their family, culture, and community. Stability improves, permanency increases, and trauma is reduced. Prep work will begin this fall with implementation in 2026. Participating agencies will be connected to a statewide cohort supported by DSP and will be focused on practice change to improve outcomes at the point of initial placement. This is your chance to lead change, and we're excited to see where it will take us. More details will be shared soon, but know this, if you're feeling inspired today, this is your invitation to turn that inspiration into action. So today, let's do more than just listen, let's be moved to act. Let's let the stories we hear remind us of why we do this work, who we're doing it for, and the future we hope for, one where children are surrounded by family, community, and this culture won't arrive on its own. But with people like you in the room, people willing to lead, to challenge the status quo, to prioritize connection over convenience, it can happen. This is a moment to be bold. This is a moment to reimagine what is possible. This is a moment for Kinspiration. And now to help us continue the momentum, I'd like to introduce us to our incredible co-sponsor, Sabrina De Santiago from Think of Us. Sabrina has been an integral part of planning this event and we absolutely could not have provided this learning opportunity without her assistance.
Alicia is too kind. You all are such amazing partners, and we're so excited to be here with you all today. For those of you who don't know, think of us. We are a system orchestrator. That means that we coordinate strategy, we activate across sectors, and then we identify and move leverage points that can make change that's long lasting. We believe that the child welfare system can serve children and families in a different way than it has been so far. It is my great pleasure to introduce Robert L. Matthews. He is our inaugural Chief Program Officer, and he is a man who brings more than 20 years of experience. He has led the DC system where he changed it to be a kin-first system with some amazing innovations. And he's also shared his expertise with the Casey family programs. We're honored to have him with us at Think of Us, and I'm sure you will find his wisdom, his insights, and his great stories something that will help you all in your day-to-day work. Please help me welcome Robert.
Can you all hear me? Okay, I'm just gonna probably use this mic here to walk around just a bit. Testing one. Okay. I don't know how many of you go to church, but you got to talk to me in order for us to get through this. It's a little quiet this morning, but I know that we're going to get through this. I started out of undergrad, and first I'm a native of Nashville, Tennessee. I live in Washington, D.C. now. And the first place I went was to a Second Chance Inc. If you don't know where that is, it's in Pittsburgh. The founders, Dr. Sharon McDaniels, the CEO, they've been doing work in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County for quite a number of years, to where the entire state, has at least 60, 70% of kids in kinship care, which of course is higher than the national average. And that's just work they've done over the course of many years, developing their own curriculum around training, their own level of support for kinship caregivers. I want to note something that was said earlier in terms of connection over convenience, because I think that is extremely, extremely important. Connection meaning that children and families naturally have a connection, a bond, a relationship. And if you think about the power that many of you hold, the power I used to hold as director in Washington, D.C., of making a decision of removing or separating a child from a parent, that's a lot of power for an organization or an individual to have. Do you all agree with that? And as many of you may be clinicians and practitioners in the work, you should know the trauma that comes when a decision is made to separate a child from their parent. Now, I've been in this work long enough to know that regardless of the reason, if you ever ask a child to sit down, where do they want to go? They say, I want to stay home with their parent, regardless of the incident that has occurred. That speaks to the connection. The convenient part really is the agency. What do we do that's convenient? Is the convenient thing to just remove the child and discount family? Because the part about the convenience is, especially when you've been doing this work for a number of years, when you come across the Smith family or you come across the Johnson family, there's this, historical generational cycle. And the workers say, oh, none of them. We should not look at any of them because the grandmother had issues with our agency, the mother, aunt, uncle, so forth and so on. And when we do that, we discount family. We discount the connection. And we increase the convenience because it's more convenient for us just to, hey, let's look and see what other kind of foster parents we have. The child's going to be safer. And that's where we kind of introduce the bias that many of us hold in this work. And then hearing about your first placements project, you know, there's the quote that goes around, and I'm sure you all either have heard it or will hear what it say, you know, first placements are best placements. Have you heard that? Have you heard that before? First placement is best placement. And where I have shifted in terms of the priority is what we should be saying. The first placement should be the last placement. And that placement, if we put all of our efforts together, should be a kin placement. First placement with kin should be the last placement. But what that requires is an incredible paradigm shift in the way we think. Now, I don't know how this is going to work. Are you controlling this? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, what I'm accustomed to as I hear and listen, sometimes I'll shift what I say because I want to ensure that what's said really connects with the purpose of today. And it really is to go across the state and talk about kinship care. And it seems that I'm going to have to, there we go. I thought I was going to have to improvise and start singing. Okay. It's going to give an overview of the presentation. We're going to talk about kinship values. I'm going to show you some data because I'm really going to want you to interact with me there. And then we'll take some questions and discussion. And then Sabrina, just wave your hand or come and nudge me when when I'm at time. Next slide. Okay. Anytime we talk, I'm gonna come down here actually, because I can't see. Anytime we talk about kin, we always have to start with values. Always start with values. What I have learned doing this work in Tennessee and other states across the country is when I have interacted with staff and we don't share the same value, it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of time. Because if they don't value family, they're not going to value this practice. And you have to be able to assess your staff to know if they value family. Kinship care values the importance of family connection, which we talked about earlier, cultural continuity, emotional stability, all those things we know. All those things we know. Children need to be tied to people who they know, whether it's through blood, marriage, or whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a coach, whether it's a teacher. Meaning that we have to expand our definition and meaning of kin. It's not just mom, dad, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. Because oftentimes as you begin to assess kin, you might find out that it may not be the safest place for the child. However, when you begin to assess and expand that network, you will find that, yeah, there's a coach there, there's a principal there, there's a teacher there that may care enough to say, you know what, I'm going to step up. I'm going to do what it takes to care for this child. And this is why I say it's a temporary situation because we want the child to go back home, right? And we know all the work that the agency has to do for reunification. Next slide. A kin first culture, and I believe you all have your kin, what is it called? The kin first project, or is that what it's called? The first placement project? Okay, family. Okay. We all know the importance of keeping children connected, emotional stability, right? I have seen cases and incidents where, children are doing pretty good, although they may be in an abusive home. Something changes, though, when you take that child out of that home, right? I know you all have seen it. You've had to where then you begin to see them act out in school, their behavioral issues, and then people are often scratching their heads, why do you think? You've taken them out of the place they called home. You've taken them out of the routine that they have. And again, regardless of the incident, this is just what they were accustomed to and what they knew. So you have to understand in making that decision what it does to a child psychologically, what it does to them emotionally, and how that plays out in their life. Some of the current challenges in the current child welfare system: lack of family finding practice. Do you all do family finding? Yes? Is it good? Have you seen it make a difference? Y'all going to talk to me? Yes? Okay. What that means is you need to turn over every possible stone to identify and locate family, right? So I know in family finding, you may have a lot of search engines, technology that's helping you locate family, but there are other ways too. You can ask the child, depending on their age of developmental ability, they can tell you, well, this is who I know, this is who I feel safe with, and it may be someone or an individual that may not come up on that spreadsheet, right? A lot of people oftentimes miss, the school emergency card. Who do you call in case of emergency? Because it may not be the parent, maybe someone else, right? There's so many ways to expand your family finding practice. Lack of financial resources. For whatever reason, when we talk about family, um, traditionally, the child welfare agency and the system, we pay foster parents, right? I know this may not be here in Wisconsin, but I remember in the early days, people had a problem. Why would I pay a relative to pay for a child that they're related to? And I'm thinking, well, why not? It's not as if they actually came to the table saying, I'm going to do this. They came to the table by way of an emergency. And so when you think about the work that we do to recruit foster parents, they come to the table saying, I want to foster, I want to nurture, right? But you're calling a relative on a whim. And the expectation is you want them to turn their life upside down with no support, financial or otherwise. How in the world do we have that type of mindset, right? The same way you're going to pay a foster parent who is unrelated to the child is the same way you need to pay a relative. The only difference is one has a relationship with the child and the other one doesn't. Think about that. And if they have a relationship with the child, do you think the child may far better with someone they have a relationship with versus someone that you put them in a stranger's home, and you all know the crisis that happen. They'll tear up the room, they'll tear up the house, do this. Next thing you know, there's a whole placement disruption. You got to find placement after placement after placement. So why not put the effort? Why not have the value in paying family to take care of their own, right? Lack of support services, services that are needed to strengthen kinship placements. If you look nationally, even if a state may not have such a high census of children placed in kin, you may find that their most stable placements are kin. So if the most stable placements are with kin, why not strengthen the supports to stabilize and strengthen kin placements? Whatever that looks like. That could look like mobile crisis stabilization, because even though it's placed with kin, doesn't mean crisis will not arise. The question is, how do you mitigate it, right? How do you strengthen that? Lack of staff training. We all know what that means. And the benefits. We already know the benefits of having a child and children placed with kin. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to take us through some data here. This is actually from a jurisdiction of which I won't say who, but I just want some insights here. This looks at the frequency of emergency separations. Now, as I show you this data, the purpose of me showing you this data is because I want you to think about ways to capture data differently that can help better inform your kinship practice and your kinship work. And the first thing to really look at are emergency versus non-emergency. Separations means basically official removals. Why would it be important to know the difference between emergency and non-emergency? Anybody? Say it again. Reaction time. Very good. Anyone else? It's not particularly a wrong answer here. Just some insights. We have one that says reaction time. Hello. There we go. Reaction time, availability of the people who are able to support. If it's non-emergency, oftentimes those can be in-home or your family preservation cases. The reason why, you know those families, right? There are risks that you can see coming. Emergencies, you don't really see those coming because you're reacting to something. But if you know in your data that you have more emergency removals versus non-emergency, that allows you to think about how you need to structure your staffing. and your workforce to accommodate this. In order to increase when an emergency happens, you have the resources necessary to strengthen your ability to place first kin with first kin. Next slide. Okay, this talks about from the previous emergency, non-emergency, but it also shows you how many happen during the days of the week. Isn't that interesting? Why in the world does it happen on hump day on a Wednesday? Now, why would this be important to know? Days of the week. Goes back to convenience. Okay. Yes, all of that is correct. If you all can't hear her, she was talking about the availability and the convenience. And now, this, I'm about to say something that's funny, but it's true. Well, I can't say it on this slide, not quite yet. But what it is showing that in the middle of the week is probably where you need to ensure that you have adequate staffing. Not much happening on Saturday, not much happening on Sunday. Although with child protection, it's 24/7, right? You know, it's 24/7. But knowing when removals have occurred, how often they occur, helps you really with your staffing from a day-to-day perspective. Let's go to the next slide. We're gonna go a little deeper. We can get it down by the time. Now, what does this slide tell you? And these are real numbers. This is not nothing made up now. I'm just kind of showing you a way that you can go granular in your data for your organization to figure out how you manage support for families. Now, when I looked at this, what it told me is that nobody needs to take lunch at 11 and 12. I'm being serious. You know, we're getting hungry during the middle of the day. Jokingly, but very seriously, this is when it happens. This is when things are popping off during lunchtime. So it is important if you can, and I think you should push yourselves to figure out how you're able to capture this data this way. Because this data represents several, I'm imagining several staff, different divisions. This is CPS. This is kinship. This is if you have your support units, family finding, all of it. All of it has to align with your data. Because as you go toward having this kin first culture, it's not just about, you know, the families out there and what you think they should do. Actually, it's more or less about that. It's really about internally. How do you shift the culture internally? Because you're going to have to build the infrastructure to support this. Next slide. Okay. Initial placement types. Basically, traditional, of course, is like stranger care. Second is kinship. This is telling us out of the 240 entries and re-entries where the initial placements went. Now, I mean, there's a lot that you can say here that, you know, overall, at least most kids went into a family-based placement, but it's a little lopsided when you're looking at traditional kinship, right? The question is, like, what could have been done differently to switch out the kinship and traditional? It's not what I call bad, but it's also not the best that we can do. I think traditional goes back to the word we talked about earlier, convenience. It's convenient. All the children in the family-based placement, it's convenient. The other thing I also know in my work and in my time is that what happens when children are stable in that traditional placement? When they're stable in a traditional placement, do we actually make effort to move them? No, we do not. And I really want you to think about that. because that's what the data tells us too. If they are stable with that foster parent, oftentimes agencies will not make any efforts to move them. Well, we know why. That's another move. That's 2 moves, depending on the time frame. And not only that, the child is doing well. But we also discount and we also ignore the connection. We ignore the connection. Nothing's popping off, or we're going to leave it there. That what I'm saying here is that your kinship model, your kinship practice, there has to be continuity. You can't just stop with what's convenient. The hard work is to get that child back to their connection, which is back to family. Next slide. Okay, this slide tells us first, second, third placement. I really think it's important to know that, because what the previous slide did not show, it showed that there were more placed than traditional. This slide is showing us, well, if there is a jurisdiction that begins to have continuity in their practice, over time, they're going to continue to try to do family finding, identifying, engaging, assessing families, to perhaps the second placement might be with kin, or perhaps the third placement might be with kin. Go back to the previous slide just for a second. Here's the other thing. Sometimes, beyond our control, if we're talking about a baby or drug exposed or whatnot, first placement might have to be at the hospital. Might have to be. Or some other type of placement. The question, though, becomes, what is the work you do at the point of when that infant needs to be discharged? So I'm showing the purpose of sometimes a child or youth may have to go to another placement first, based on medical necessity, acuity, whatever the case is. It may be that their behavior versus the actual incident of abuse or neglect, they may need stabilizing their behavior before they can be integrated back into community or back with individuals, right? That goes to where it's a diagnostic, emergency care, or whatnot, or a group home. Not group home or those others for the sake of an open bed. It's for the sake that's what the child needs at the moment. The question becomes is, what do you do while they're there? How do you engage family while they're there? How do you make them a part of the treatment plan along the way? No, not at the end. Not at the end. Not when it's like a week before the child has to be discharged, and then you say, okay, auntie, uncle, I want you to come in. No, they need to be able to learn what's happened, how the child has, progressed in their treatment goals and things of that nature. Okay, let's move forward. You can go past this. Okay. It's important to know that when you cannot place with kin first, what are the barriers? And I've learned it's different for different states. Here, you might have identified some family, but they were unwilling or unable to foster. That's important to know. What does that really mean, unwilling or unable? Could be financial, yeah. Now, I want to stick to that one, because another factor or variable could be that as much as we can identify family, in my experience, I've seen where there's quite a bit of family around, but it's so much mess going on. I'm using the word mess. They don't even like each other. They're mad at the mama's mad at them. They don't want to get in the middle of what's going on. Those are true occurrences that happen. Some of that can be mitigated in family group conferencing. Some of that can be mitigated in red teams. Some of that can be mitigated in child family team meetings. Now, just because that may be present doesn't mean that we should not make efforts, right? That's the whole point there. Lack of space, I'm assuming we all have run into that. I'm assuming we all know the passage of the Kin First regulations. I'm assuming, I don't know, are you all in the process of adopting those or have a process to waive some of those things? whether it's space, okay? They reside outside the jurisdiction. It could be a myriad of things. The point is that know what the barriers are to first kin, and it's not just about knowing them, but what are the strategies that you put in place that can resolve some of this, right? That's the key to it all. Next slide. Now, here the previous slide was just barriers overall. These are barriers to initial placements with kin. And this one said mitigating licensing requirements, which we kind of talked about. We know there's so many. And, you know, each state has their own regulatory practices that govern how they license foster homes. And so as you are, I'm assuming, looking at the more specific regulations for kin, my hope is that it will make that process go smoother. And again, we talk about newborns going into the hospital, and then also sometimes parental behavior. Next slide. When children and youth are placed with kin, what are the relationships? Now, if you had asked me this 20 years ago, they all talked about grandparents. All talked about grandparents. When I got in this field, it was grandparents, and many of them were 60, 70, sometimes 80 years old. And that generation, really, they stepped up. They stepped up, right? Many were retired. Okay, 20 years later, things have changed. We have working relatives. And when you have working relatives, that model has to look totally different. There's not this expectation people are going to stay home. That's not how it works. So this is where the field has shifted so much. Some of us, I'm not saying in this room, are still operating 20 years ago. Even as you try to recruit foster parents, we're thinking, how many of them are going to stay home? Not many. Not 20 years ago, they would stay home, they drive the child to school, they take them everywhere they needed. Now, I'm going to say DC was quite a eye-opening experience for me because they didn't want to do nothing. They didn't want to take them nowhere. We had to, I mean, I'm talking about my largest contracts with transportation. I had to transport kids everywhere. And for me, I just scratched my head. I do not understand how you sign up for something like this and then you can't do it. So all I'm saying is that you have to change it. I didn't. You call it a foster parent. You know what a parent does? So that's just my soapbox. But I'm saying all that to say is things have changed. And the level of support you have to provide resource parents, foster parents, kinship parents has shifted. And that requires financial resources to ensure they have the supports that they need. And we're talking about people who are much younger. Much younger. Average 35 in their 40s, right? Now, again, another comedic moment. 35 and 40-year-olds, they haven't quite came out of the club yet. So that means they have a life outside of caring for these kids. That's where respite becomes an option. Seriously, there's like, I'm going out of town this weekend. I need y'all to do something with the kids. That's what they said. We had to find respite for those homes. And so what we may think is outrageous, it is true. It is true. That means you have to shift with the realities that exist today with how things are. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Basically what this slide will show is whenever, however, your kin program practice model is designed and developed, you should have a continuous quality improvement model. One of the main reasons is for sustainability. I've been too many places to where they start something and it falls apart after a number of months, after a number of years, because it's just like, okay, we did it. And no one on the back end is checking to see the effectiveness of what you're doing. Meaning that you have to continually track, monitor, collect, analyze your data. You have to do that. not just pulling out what doesn't work. I had to shift my brain some years ago to be like, okay, what are the things we do that actually do work? Because there are things that we do that do work, and how do we ensure that those things are messaged and scaled across a state to say, this is some of the best practice that's happening across Wisconsin. We should continue to do those things, right? The data will also show, well, here are some things that we might need to discontinue. Discontinue means that we've seen it, we've scaled it, it doesn't work. So why do we keep doing it? And I have found that's the hardest thing for a state to decide to do, especially when there's a program where it's about 20 people have utilized it and you say it's great. It is not. It has not met its desired outcome. Where it's been great for 20, it's taken up financial resources to where those resources can be repositioned to support something else that possibly can work. And all of those kinds of questions happen when you have a good CQI model. And you're able to, in real time, be flexible enough to adapt, shift, and change very quickly. Child welfare is a field that has moved at a snail's pace, incremental improvements, incremental progress, and that's fine because it's vast. It's very vast. But you have to have a nimble enough organization to be able to shift very quickly, and that it's data informed to support your findings. Are we toward the end? We good? Okay. Is this a time for questions? That's y'all's turn, actually. If you have questions, you may not. Who's going to be the brave soul? Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. And I want us all to really think about that because that is a very common occurrence in our work. When a child is placed with a stranger, they're doing well, right? They're doing well in school, they're doing this, they're doing that, and the other. The question becomes is, what's the permanency goal? I say that because if the permanency goal is reunification, it's not just trying to reunify that child with the parent. You're trying to reunify them to the connection of family. And I will say the feds have not done us any justice in terms of how we are evaluated in terms of placement moves. I'll be honest, I was a child welfare director. I'm not saying here in Wisconsin, but I didn't really care about if the child moved. I care more about if it was a positive move. I call it a positive move. If it's going to relatives, it's a positive move that helps to me strengthen reunification, strengthen connection. Because your question was around the data, and some of that has to be mitigated in your child family teams, honestly. And I mean, it's going to be hashed out because, again, it also starts with values. I've seen staff that be like, this child is stable. I am not recommending this child be moved, which is why I always had a kinship worker in those meetings. Because the worker, trust me, I know they come to the table with the best of intentions. They really do. But it's never the best intention when you're just discounting family altogether. Even when that child is doing well in that placement, you have to keep them maintained with their connection to family. Had a question back here, I believe.
I just had a question about the separation time frames. So you said it's between 11 and 12. Do you know the location of those? I was curious because most kids may be in school during that time. Is that when that's happening, or is it, so I guess, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure can. That particular slide, yes, most kids were in school during that time. And in that particular jurisdiction, most of the calls, which is synonymous across the country, where more educators and teachers are calling in to your hotline or central intake, expressing or reporting allegations of abuse and neglect, and oftentimes the kids are at school. Now, I think, at least from what I gathered, is teachers did call during the time kids were in school because they felt they could keep them safer versus calling when the child is at home. Because then the agency could work directly with the school to coordinate kind of the whole removal process to where you would not have the parent that's present, and things could become physical, and it creates this whole situation that the child doesn't even want people to see. I've seen where a removal is taking place where somebody's going into the classroom, not making a big deal of it, because I think the process itself is traumatic. But hey Johnny, principal wants to see you in an office. So you're not making it like somebody individuals coming in taking the child out like it's law enforcement, right? That's why also I didn't say much about it, but think about the practice of removing a child and how that should be carried out. I know it's something we do routinely on a daily basis, but I think we need to think about the care of what that looks like from the child's lens. That even if it is in school, people know when that little white car comes up, what that means. These kids in DC do. They know what that meant. So how do you minimize some of that? So yes, most of the time it was in school because the teachers wanted to keep the kids safe, and not have any potential physical altercations with the parent. Yes, ma'am. Oh, she's bringing the mic.
This might sound like, hello? Okay. So it might sound like a silly question, but because obviously it would be based on availability and like willingness and capacity. But is there, in my own personal experience, my son went to a parental kinship, and that actually was used kind of like to sever my connection. So even in that he was in kinship, which was important, but is there anything done like for both parents, right? Because children have two parents, two families, extensions of. So is there anything, any kind of practice or rule of thumb that you use to make sure that children are like getting the best for both parents?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things to that. There are some jurisdictions that do not, I don't know very many that what I call license a parent to care for their own child, right? Most of them facilitate what we call ensuring that the either probably non-custodial parent, let's just say for a scenario, a father. Most jurisdictions go through a process of proving paternity. They do, right? Somebody's just not going to come and say, I'm daddy, and we're going to believe it, right? That we got to have some kind of proof, whether it's the signature on the birth certificate or going through the whole process of getting DNA tests. That said, once you go through the process of kind of assessing that, it is having a discussion around the other parent or the parent's capacity, the parent's ability, what types of supports. Because I have seen and witnessed where there are fathers that step up, but this is a father who may have been recently incarcerated. This is a father who may not have housing, but it's a father who has the will. So I want y'all to think about that. All these other strikes against the father or any parent, but they have the will. The question is, what does the agency do to support, right? Because I can tell you what I would do, whether it's a mother or a father, and I understood that they're recently incarcerated, they don't have housing, all this kind of stuff. From a value perspective, I'm gonna try to help that parent get the supports they need to raise their child. Now, the political side of my job was, okay. They were like, well, why would you do that? I was like, well, actually, it's cheaper doing that than bringing a child in foster care. And it is. It was cheaper to have me have that child being raised by their parent, provide the father and the mother the supports they need, whether it's housing, whatnot, versus bring that child in foster care because I don't know when they're going to leave at that point. I have no idea. Y'all know the hurdles it takes for a child to go back home, not just with our agency, but with the courts. It's just too much. So part of that is going through a process to figuring it out. And that is also still a shift in our field, right? It's still a shift. Because most be like, well, he just got out of prison, got out of jail, whatever the case is, he don't have a house, and they stop it right there. And then we go to the convenience, bring them into foster care. And God knows how long they'll be there. So. Yes, ma'am. Hold on. Can you ask that again just to make sure the others hear that?
What does that practically look like when you say provide resources to the parent who just got out of incarceration? What are some things? I obviously maybe networking within the community, but can you elaborate?
Sure. I'll use DC as an example. We funded community-based organizations called the Collaboratives. DC is separated into wards, 8 wards. And so I understood what my mandate was as the director, meaning that my job is to ensure that when children come into foster care, it is a temporary safe haven. I'm going to provide everything they need. I also understood my job from a prevent child abuse perspective. How do I work with community-based providers who are in the community, who have what I would say legitimacy, where families feel comfortable, give them the funds they need to do the work that I can't do, right? From a mandated perspective. So when we're talking about a father, there are many programs in DC where they help incarcerated fathers, or actually there's an organization in DC for what they call returning citizens, right? And those are returning citizens from jail. Plenty of resources there. Then you also have them look for housing. Now, granted, everyone knows affordable housing is an issue across the country, but there are specific programs for people who are returning citizens or formerly incarcerated, to where in some locales, there are specific programs to where they can be housed temporarily until they, do job training, secure a job, do all the things that we know they need to do to reintegrate back into normalcy. There's nothing stopping us from doing that with the parent to ensure that child is with the parent, someone that they love, someone that's willing, and that child is not in foster care. The child is not in foster care. So you're not wasting your dollars in any way. You're not wasting your time. You're really doing what we all want to do, is keeping families together. And then when we talk about how to prevent child abuse, that's the best way to do it. That's the best way to use prevention dollars, paying CBOs to do the work in the community where people and families trust the most. And we can just be the funder, which is what we should do. Any other questions? Going once, twice? Well, I'll be over here. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you all. It really doesn't feel like it's on. But we're going to take about a 10-minute break. I will come up and let you all know when we've got 1 minute before we start again. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. We're going to get started. Our next part of the day is a lived experience panel. I think you all know that the system is different once you've walked in it. Think of your own experience. Think of something where, sorry, let's see.
There you go.
I'm gonna, well, think about something where you had an experience, a visit to the ER, right? What was your experience like as a patient when you had to go there, when you were in trauma, when you were suffering one of the worst days for you, to the people who were on the other side, the people who were working it day to day? Perhaps your broken leg was the worst pain you felt. But to them, they're like, oh, she's not bleeding out. It's going to be fine. I had a broken nose, but different story. So with that, I would just love for everybody to take that frame, to think about how the system is different for the different actors in it, as we learn from the amazing wisdom of our panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Hi, everybody. It's so exciting to see you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you to those that are on Zoom. My name is Holly Telfer, and I have had the pleasure of being the kinship care coordinator at DCF for more years than I want to say, but it's been 20. And also the thing that I love the most, probably of the things I get to do, is co-facilitate with Brittany, who's out there, my co-colleague, the relative caregiver work group. And so Natasha has been, I think, a charter member, right? Since 2018 when we started the group. Is that Angela? Oh my gosh, that's great. Hey, Angela, come on up. I'll send this over to Deanne.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deanna Coben. I am the lived experience specialist in DCF at the Bureau of Safety and Wellbeing. I came as a parent with lived experience into the Parent Supporting Parents program in Rock County. And I was a parent partner for almost a year and a half. And I was able to mentor those parents going through the CPS process and the child welfare program, do lots of panels like this, excuse me, do lots of panels like this for my own lived experience. But I get to sit here today as DCF's parent leader facilitator, and that is lived experience parents that come together and work on policy and do events like this. And next to me, I have my friend Amber here, who's a parent partner in Jefferson County with the Parent Supporting Parents program. So we're going to allow the lived experts to introduce themselves. They're going to talk about 1 to 2 minutes just to kind of tell you where they're from and kind of their experience, and then we'll get into some more questions. But I just want to make sure that all the lived experts, if you could just let us know which county or which agency that you had your services through. And I will let Natasha start.
Hello, I am Natasha Broxton. As Holly mentioned, I am been a part of the relative caregiver group since its inception. So I've seen it from start to now and beyond. I am a relative caregiver to my nephew. I've been a relative, he's in 3rd grade. I've been a relative caregiver to him and my niece over the years. I'm a mom of 7, including my nephew. I am also the president and CEO of Select Auto Parts and Sales, Milwaukee's only woman-owned, Black-owned auto recycler in the nation. In addition to having this passion about relative caregivers and just community in general, it just brings me joy. I come with my lived experience, and it may not all be pretty. From when he they first came into my home. But we have some inside information, being relative caregivers that might not be seen from the outside. So glad to be here. And yeah.
All right, my name's Amber Check. I'm a parent partner in Jefferson County now. I actually started underneath Deanna in Rat County, so I've been doing the program for just about a year and a half. And my experience is as a parent whose son was in the CPS system. It started about 4 years ago when he was about 2, and I was living with my parents at the time, and they are actually the ones that had called CPS on me due to my struggles with my mental health and self-medicating with drugs. From there, there's a lot of tension. It's hard when you lose your child, but then at the same time, he was placed with them and he stayed, and I moved out of their house. It was, sorry. There's a lot of strong feelings, emotions, anger, everything else, but the best thing is that he stayed with my parents. He was with people that loved and cared about him, and I knew that they were going to take care of him. And I later had found out that if he had been put in placement, he probably would have ended up moving to Minnesota with my in-laws, and that would have made reunification and every aspect difficult in order for me to get him back. So him staying close to home, staying with family, even though it wasn't easy to start, was the best option. So when you're looking at kinship, like finding those placements and those family members that are there and working through that is, I don't know, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for my worker that stuck through me on it all. And my parents just for being there. My bond with my son is stronger than ever. I've had him back in my placement for over 2 years now. And my mom's my best friend, and none of this would have happened if she wouldn't have stepped up and taken my son and taken care of him. So I'm all for kinship and finding family members and working through that anger and pain, because as hard as it is, it's worth it in the end.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Clements. I have the joy of raising my granddaughter now. I was a kinship for my nephew also, but this time around, I call it parenting second time around. Um, I have a lot of experience now that I didn't even see with raising my nephew. This time around, because I had boys, so I think the first time raising my nephew, I think it was still a little bit easier because it was still like, okay, I got boys. It's just like having another boy in the home. But this time around, I'm intentional about being more seeing the facial impressions, listen to understand. This time around about being in this space, I'm able to understand really what it's like to be in the presence of being a kinship, the social part. I notice now from a girl perspective, even though I am a female, I didn't really pay attention like I am now, how important kinship is. And then I'm really all in, like, oh my God, like I can see why the connection, how it built the social part, because even when I got custody of her, she couldn't read and write. She was traumatized and abused really, really bad. And just the fact of how the school says when they first got her, she used to stay in a corner a lot, didn't socialize, versus the next school year, she got friends. She want to participate in stuff. And I'm a treatment foster parent, and I didn't even get results like that being a treatment foster parent to a child that I was a stranger to. So I noticed the difference when you're a kinship, that the child become more social, become more accepted. and become more walking in their truth and being more I think stronger in walking in they can do this. So I've seen the difference between me being a treatment foster parent and a more kinship, as in I seen the difference in a child behavior, I can say. So this time around, I call it parenting second time around, I'm being more intentional of seeing the difference, and I'm learning a lot this time where I'm taking notes. So yeah, I'm growing a lot this time. So thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. I forgot to mention that the system that we worked with, Milwaukee County and Waukesha County. I live in Brookfield now, but like the first time I had my family, we dealt with the Milwaukee County system, and then but now it's Waukesha County. Sorry.
Yeah.
I feel like you all really touched on our first question. So if there's anything else any of you want to add in regards to your experience with kinship, you know, having had the children in your life with you as a relative, or yes, I guess all of you, or with a relative in your case, Amber. Anything else you want to add? I guess sub question there is, or how could have that experience been changed? Anything, or should we move to the next one?
For me, as a family, and I alluded to this in my introduction, you get to see some behind the scenes things. You get to see things that may not be right. And from where we come from, we just step in and take care of it. We don't wait for CPS to get involved. So, and this actually had a negative impact on me when it came to actually getting resources and support for my nephew, because I stepped in, or someone else mentioned that they called CPS. I was the one trying to get CPS involved, and there was no response. But I knew that I couldn't sit by and do anything. So it was a negative beginning, right? For me, because the supports were not there, but I knew that I had to do something. And I can remember at that time, I had another child the same age as my nephew in daycare, and I'm paying out of pocket for that child in daycare. And now I need to pay or figure out childcare for my nephew. You don't have two babies at the same time. Usually you just have one, right? That's why way you plan it out. But this wasn't the case when I decided to take my nephew in, because I knew that he needed me. And so I sought support, and I was told, because I stepped in, there is no support. And I was left to try to figure things out on my own. So, we ended up working it out, obviously, and, supports did come later, but that lack of knowledge, lack of education, lack of support, lack of resources had us at a rough start when I first, brought my nephew and my niece in my home.
For me, like with my parents being the ones that had my child and were involved in it, it strengthened our bond, and my parents were able to see that behind the scenes stuff that they wouldn't have seen if he was in placement. And it helped my mom understand a lot. Like, she was able to see like how much my mental health played a factor into everything. And I think it helped her work through the trauma that I put her through, because she was able to see like why everything was happening and what was going on, as opposed to if he would have been in placement, she wouldn't have been as involved and would not have seen all those aspects and the ins and outs, and understand that my mental health was such a huge factor in everything. And that helped her actually become an even bigger supporter for me. Like now, like she steps in and knows, like if I call and need help, she knows to just be there for me. And it wouldn't be that way if he hadn't been with them.
For me, it allowed me to do more support groups for the parents of the families that the kids was removed for. Because also, even though the kids was removed, that's like a grieving process. So therefore, I noticed that if the child is still longing for that parent that they was removed from, if they can see that parent even healthy, that does something for their mental health. So for me, it allowed me to look for more resources for that parent that they were removed from and them siblings so that they can be having a healthy connection in that way. So it made me look at the family as a whole and not just that child that was removed to be safe, but to look at the family as a whole.
Great. I love these. So, next question for our lived experts is what is something, whether it was a support, a process, or even a person that made a positive impact during your experience? And whoever wants to start first.
For me, you're going to see the thing. Childcare was a big thing for me, but when those supports actually did come, and I did get connected with the right department I found out that I was able to qualify for kinship care. And with kinship care, it wasn't even about the subsidy; it was about the child care for me. And with that kinship care, I qualified for child care. And my case manager, her name was Shelly. She's actually the one, I thought about this, that introduced me to the relative caregiver group when it came about. But once I connected with Shelly, it was a game changer for us. She made the process easy as far as getting me qualified for kinship for my nephew, getting us, qualified for childcare under that program, walking me through any questions that I might have, making sure that I'm signing up for summer childcare or camp and things like that. And then just kept, even after being signed up for the kinship, keeping me connected with other resources that may be available, like the community closet in Waukesha County, that I had access to that I would have never known about had I not been connected with Shelly. But I do feel like she went above and beyond to make sure that we stayed connected to resources and information even after that initial setup.
For me, I'd have to say my mom, obviously. My caseworkers, though, that I had were huge. I know, like, it took me a minute to get my crap together and want to start moving towards getting better. But as soon as I was ready, it was, okay, where do you want to go? How long do you want to stay for? And then it just kind of was smooth sailing after that. And there was just a lot of support from my worker throughout everything. And then from my mom, and just knowing that my son was safe the whole time just made everything so much easier and one less thing to worry about while I worried about myself and trying to focus on getting better for me so I could get better for everybody else.
Can you remind us what county that you?
Jefferson County.
Yeah. Thank you.
I thought it was looking, I thought it was looking back. We're not on Tuesday. Um, well, the relative care group was about the positive that I had, very positive.
Can you tell us about that group?
Just being around other people that was going through something, the resources, and just coming together for our voice to be heard, and just a lot of things that they put together for us was very helpful. So that was the only positive process that I had at this time. That was it. Nothing else was able, not even a kinship that they gave us. That was the extra rent, because once you get a child in your home, you have to move, because I was living in a home where it was just enough room for me. So I had to move. So that's extra rent. That was, my rent went up $500-600. So kinship is only 3 something. So that wasn't even enough to cover her part of the rent to care for a child. So that wasn't even enough.
Can I also piggyback on the relative caregiver group? Yeah, like I feel like it was traumatizing for us as relative caregivers, even going through the process of, just trying to get help. But the relative caregiver group, it was just like a safe haven. It was a place to vent. It was a place to see other tearing up other caregivers that are experiencing and going through some of the same things. I'm like, I'm not alone. It's not just me, or I'm not asking for too much. So just, being able to have a group and a support like that where, you can feel heard and, be seen. I mean, we're still friends today. I know you just came on like a few years ago, but we're still connected with a lot of these parents from all across the state of Wisconsin, but also being able to be the change that you want to see. I don't have to be here. I choose to be here and to follow this process through. I was able to see in the beginning where we were only getting like $200 a month. That was me, right? And now these parents that are coming in, they're getting double that, I think, right? I don't know because I'm not getting it, but it's like, wow, we did that, right? Like we're the ones that are having these meetings and giving our input, and to actually see the little change that's happening, it is change, right? And it actually feels like we're making a difference.
I just want to add that that is the truth. And back to you, Angela, when you said that we created something, it was really the members that helped us create change for all the other caregivers in the state. So you guys are the ones, that did the work. We were just there to listen and to try to, pass that on to those who can make those final decisions. But you've done a lot over the last 6 years. 6 years now? Wow. Okay. So again, you guys are doing so well. You're answering so many of the questions all at once. But if you have anything to add on this one, as you look back on your experience, what kind of support, individual, a staff person, otherwise, and maybe someone in your life was missing that could have been helpful? What would have been helpful that maybe was missing in your situation?
When I first got my granddaughter, she was in so much trauma. I think I needed like the first 3 years just to care for her. Her trauma was so intense, and I was working full time, and I already work in the wraparound system. It was like I didn't get a break. I just worked 8 to 12 hours in this case. Then I came home, I had my own case. And actually, her case was worse than any case I ever even worked in. And I worked in wraparound since 96. So her case was actually the worst case I ever had to deal with. So the only good thing about it is once I got custody of her, I think I lost 100 pounds. So, so when everybody kept seeing me, are you sick? No, I have never seen nothing like this in my life. So just the trauma I had to go through and witness, I'm like, I think I needed 3 years off just to work strictly with this right here, because it was, I suffered in silence because I was even scared to say something, thinking they were going to say, well, do we need to remove her? So I just was quiet. And I was working at work, and then I was lacking at work. They was even looking at my work performance like, this ain't her. This is one of our greatest. I'm like, you don't know what I go through at home. And then I was looking like, there's no way I'm going to give up my own seed versus working with strangers I don't know. So I was balancing it, but I was dying in the inside. So, but it was a good thing because I was shedding pounds. But yeah, I was like, oh my God. I mean, it was so intense. I was just throwing up. I was like, this is, who did a child like this while I was at home? Like, oh my God. Like, and yet and still nobody, I didn't even know who to pour out to. And like I said, this group was my safe haven, because I was like, I was taking every time, and they was like, we're going to be up here, those little at the Dales or whatever. Here I come, because, oh my God. So yeah. And this May 23rd made my second year but I think the first 3 years, I don't think I needed to work and just focus on her. Like she's in therapy twice a week, not even once. And even her therapist was looking like, "You still full time?" I'm like, "I'm about to die." Yes. Like even the gas alone is like 200 a week, just getting her to therapy. So yeah. So the trauma with that is intense. So yeah. So that's what I was missing, that I didn't know it was that. And see, CPS didn't remove her. I had to go out of pocket and hire a private investigator and go straight through the courts because they kept screening it out, kept screening it out. And I'm like, you can't be serious. This not neglect to you, but I finally won. So I was like, you got the wrong one. I'm an advocate. I'm coming for you. So so when the courts found it, was like, she's right, this neglect. I'm like, duh. So yeah, so when they finally ruled in my favor, I was like, what was I thinking? Am I built for this? But yeah, it was severe. So yeah, that's what I needed. I needed to be off because it's severe. But I can see some breakthrough. And then once I can see her when she's finally healed, I'm like, it was worth it. So yeah.
For me, and I touched on this a little bit, just going through the process of being told that I don't qualify or I can't get any services. So just proper training and education for the people that actually work in the departments, right? I was told that I couldn't get, there wasn't anything out there, but I didn't give up, and I had to keep pushing and keep searching and keep looking, and it was just unnecessary time wasted. Unnecessary money wasted too, because there were some resources there, but nobody knew about them. Or if they did, it wasn't like readily made available to me. And I know we've done some work with that through the navigation tool now. But even once I finally got connected with, and I'm sorry, I don't know the proper names for these departments, but the department that would handle childcare, being told, well, you make too much money to qualify for childcare. So that's another delay, you know, with getting childcare, because I'm being told on one end that I should be able to get childcare, but then when I go to this department, they're saying, oh, you make too much money to qualify for childcare, you know, but you shouldn't be using my income because this is my nephew and I'm his relative, you know. So just a lot of unnecessary back and forth that causes undue harm to myself, to my nephew, you know. But yeah, so just you know, appropriate resource navigation, I guess is what you can call it.
Oh, these are so good. I love the resource navigator. I want to be a resource navigator, kind of. Okay. So the next question we have, so we have kinship care providers up here as well as a parent. So for kinship navigation, what was the biggest barrier, which I see that you already answered. What is the biggest barrier you faced as a kinship care provider? And then for Amber, what is the biggest barrier that you faced as a parent with a child placed in kinship?
Think it was my own barrier, honestly. Like from the beginning, just the feelings, the tension, the holes I dug, everything else made it very difficult to get things going. The visits were super hard in the beginning. But once I kind of got through my own crap and realized, you know, like, hey, it's you, it's not them. They're trying to help you. Everything went so much smoother and so much better. So I honestly, I think I was my own barrier.
Can you tell me how your worker helped you work through that?
She was patient with me, very patient, and just waited till I was ready. Like with addiction and struggling with mental health, you have to be the one that's ready to find the help. Until you're ready yourself, you're not getting anywhere. Nobody can force you, nobody can make you. So once that like kind of went on and I knew I was ready, like she was already ready with places for me to go. And I think it was like 2.5 weeks after I said I want to go, I was gone.
Ugh, that gave me goosebumps. Thank you. We already kind of hit that one. Yeah. All right. Holly, I think we already kind of talked about that here.
Yeah, they're just too good at answering and being so comprehensive. Okay. Uh, so in your experiences, how did kinship care or your being a relative caregiver or your child being with your parents help you build stability and connection for your children as well as I guess any young adults? I think we're talking about younger kids out here. So
I had a chance to think about this question prior, and I could remember when my nephew, he's been with me, I believe this is going on the third year. He's permanently placed with me. When he first came to our home, um, our family would come around and see him thriving. And I mean, this was right after the situation happened where he had to be removed. There was some abuse, and people would make comments that he doesn't even seem like anything happened to him. Like, for him, it was like he was home, he was with family. And you didn't see the trauma play out like we knew that it happened. So I think that's the biggest thing, like him being able to be in a safe place, a familiar place, with family. It allowed him to just keep thriving, despite of what happened to him.
It for me, like the supports, my parents are the biggest supports for me and my son. Like through everything, I've found out and was properly diagnosed as bipolar. So my life still is a struggle every once in a while. Like I never know what I'm going to wake up to some days. And I know that all I have to do is pick up the phone and call my mom and say, "Mom, I need you to take Hunter for me." She's there. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. She takes him, she knows, and I know he's safe and he's got stability with them, and I'm safe and I have stability with them. And if he wouldn't have been with them from the get-go, that wouldn't be there.
To me, with the trauma that my granddaughter go through or been through, for her to been with me with 2 years, the communication that she has, she's able to talk about what she's experiencing at the time. I can say on one occasion, she told me, "I need hugs and kisses." And I was like, "Oh, wow, you're 9." And I was like, she expressed that. To me, that let me know I don't have to find her vaping, cutting on herself, running away. Because if she expressed that need now, she's letting me know, just like a check engine light before something happens. So I was happy to know that she trusted me, that was a safe environment, and that she didn't go out and experience trying to find something to fulfill that need, but she told someone she trusted and loved. So that was healthy for me to know. Another time, she had come home and tell me about bullying or something's not right. So again, I knew she felt comfortable and safe. Those are things that in the Black and brown community I have never experienced. I don't think my own boys told me what was going on with them. So I was happy to know that something that I'm learning that I'm able to create, that if she did experience trauma, that when she came through that door, she was able to unpack, and that was a safe environment for her. So I do understand being in kinship now, kids that go through things, that being placed in a relative home and whatever they've been through, they can learn to heal, and then they can learn to strive and have a better experience being placed with family. So I learned that, and that stability and how to build. So that's what I'm learning this time around.
Okay, I have one more question for our lived experts. And then if the audience would like to think of some questions, we are going to be able to pass the microphone around. And same thing with online. If you want to throw something in the chat, we'll get some cards and hopefully get those answered for you. So, out of all the things everybody has shared up here, is there something that you haven't shared that you would like this group in person and online to leave with?
This might go along with one of the other questions that was asked earlier, but I would just like for relative caregivers to be looked at the same way as foster parents. Um, I have friends that foster and who were fostering around the same time that we had our situation, and we're just looked at different as a relative caregiver. I would like, yeah, I would just say that as relative caregivers that we're looked at and provided the same support, the same resources that a foster parent would receive. Because like this was mentioned earlier, the only difference is that one of us is kin and one of us is not. But we're all stepping up to the call.
And I would like to piggyback off of that. After being a treatment foster parent, I stated the same thing after getting my granddaughter and my nephew. My nephew had RAD, attachment disorder, and she has adjustment disorder. And that's the first thing I said when I was a treatment foster parent. I was getting like $3,000 for somebody else's child that wasn't mine that had those same diagnoses. Now I got my nephew and my granddaughter got the same diagnosis. The behavior don't change. The only thing was different is we're related. But the behavior didn't change. But I got somebody else's child with the same diagnosis, and you gave me a whole bunch of money, resources, crisis worker, 3 therapists. I had about 4 crisis worker. When I got my granddaughter, I asked for a tutor. They told me to pay for it. I asked for what is it? For the parent to have supervised visit. They told me to pay for it, but when I got the child that wasn't mine, they paid for the supervised visit. Everything was out of pocket for me for the same things I asked for with the treatment foster child. The only difference is I was some kin. Then they asked me for all of my, can I afford this child? But when it came to the child that I didn't have no clue about, I had every resources in the world. Then when I asked them, hey, his behavior getting too bad, you're gonna have to come and get the child. Oh, they upped the money. So when I told you come get him, you upped the money. But then if I tell them come and get my granddaughter, they have found someone to come and get her right away and then pay her for what I asked you to help me with. So that's what needs to change because the behavior doesn't change. But the difference with the kinship is we long suffering. We'll still deal with it because the fact of we are some kin. So
I think that placing with family can be some of the most tension-filled places to go just because you know each other, you know the past, you know the history, but regardless of that, like stepping up to a plate and you guys taking your family on is the most important thing because the child's with their family then, and I can't imagine my son being placed with anybody but family, so like you guys are awesome.
and one more thing, we become creative. Even though we know sometimes the child was abused or safe, if we have a big barbecue, we make sure that the child is outside and they still get to see the siblings and the mama and they get to leave. They can't come in your house. So we still give them that some type of connection so they can bond. So we become creative. So,
All right. So, any questions for our lived experts as they come? Got some online questions.
So this is a question from Jefferson County for the panel. Do you have current connections with the biological parents or other family members? If so, were there barriers or feelings around being uncomfortable, and how did you overcome those feelings?
My situation is my sister is developmentally disabled. So there's some grace and there's understanding, there's inside information that comes into play with knowing her situations. But then that's like a whole nother thing in itself, like being able to get resources for her. I think I sought this group out. It's like, okay, what supports are there for her so that her kids can stay in home with her? what is available to her. I didn't have that information, and it led me on this journey to try to figure that out on my own. The first time around, this is the second time that my nephew, who's now permanently placed with me, I was actually penalized for running my own child protective services program, getting her some parenting classes, making sure that she has treatment set up. Is there any type of diagnosis that we don't know about? Is there anything that says that she shouldn't have children in her care? So that information wasn't available to me, but I kept trying to figure it out and navigate on my own and put my own program in place to try to keep or unify the mom with the parent, the mom with the kids. But that ended up, again, that was looked down upon within the department because I, went that route to do that. But yeah, we do have a relationship, with my sister. I love her. And I think some of us mentioned here that it's the best thing because there's boundaries, right? My nephew still has a relationship with his mom. She's still invited to the cookout. Okay. And he doesn't think that there's anything different going on. You know what I'm saying? Because we're able to keep this unicorn environment for him, but with boundaries.
Also, yes, again, I put myself in knowing that the child still need that connection, and then teach the child what healthy boundaries looks like. And then she has a safe word. So whenever she feels, she doesn't use the word trauma, she use activate. So she'll say, Grandma, I'm activated. So if she feels uncomfortable or the mom is making her where it reminding her of something of her past, she'll say, Grandma, I feel activated. She'll say, that's like a soda being shook up. So if you shake that soda up and you open it up, then it's about to explode, it's time to go. So when she tell me, Grandma, I'm activated, I was like, time to go. So whenever we meet at a park or if it's a gathering, that's when the mom and the siblings, so she have that connection because she's always been in different foster homes. She lost her father. All of that is a grieving process. And I don't want her to grow up to keep thinking she got to keep taking losses. So I keep her more rooted as possible. So.
And here's a comment from the chat. I wish kinship care covered the same costs as foster care. There need to be initiatives and government funding to change that, as those who use local don't often have a say, who are local, who don't often have a say about how much money is available. Thank you for being heard, for helping families, and to those parents who were brave enough to share their stories. And there were some other thank yous in the chat as well.
Any other questions? Oh, here we go. I knew somebody would do it. Of course.
It's not not so much a question as it was just, I want to echo, first of all, thank you for sharing with us. But it was so interesting to hear from that other perspective that, there was that fear of asking for help because then they're like, oh, well, if you need the help, then you must not be fit. And I know I experienced that same feeling after reunification, where I'm like, well, if you think I'm going to seek mental health services, like you're wrong. Because you don't want anyone to question your ability to do the care. And that was just, I've been in this work for a little bit now, and I love that through your sharing, I get to hear all these different perspectives, and I'd never considered that. So thank you for sharing.
I did like how Angela brought up, did somebody over here? Okay, no, that the trauma, right? The trauma of these kids, bringing that up. Thank you very much for that, Angela.
And a question, what is your self-care to manage the stress connected to handling the trauma associated with handling the various stresses?
Ooh. Me, I have a strong prayer life. And for self-care, I don't do nothing. Even if I just stare at the wall, I do nothing at all. So even my grandbaby's like, Grandma, you just sitting there. That's my self-care. I don't do, because I'm always doing something. So I don't do nothing. So Self-care, if I unbuckle my bra, that's nothing. I'm not doing nothing because I have it on for 16 hours a day. So yes. Nothing.
Echoing that. The question got asked and I put my head down because this is a space where I need to do better. Yeah, like, I mean, I have a huge family. I'm running my own company. I have employees. But I would say being a part of groups like the relative caregiver group is self-care for me. And just being able to take the time out to meet with other parents and things of that nature. And have my voice be heard and feel like I'm making a change in the community. That's self-care for me. I love helping people. So anything that's related to that is considered self-care. But I will go in my room and I will close my door, and it's every man for themselves. Okay, and they know what that means. Okay, but yeah, that's what self-care can also look like for me.
I'm gonna echo off the work thing because the work thing is huge. Like, my job can be stressful, but it's also part of my self-care because it just helps me feel good about going through everything I did and then knowing that I can help other parents going through similar stuff. But then closing my door for 5 minutes too. It's like, okay, buddy, 5 minute break, mommy needs a break, and walk away. Or calling grandma and pop up and being like, Grandma, can you guys take them for the night? Because I need a little bit longer than a 5 minute break. So just knowing kind of when to pause and take that moment for yourself is the biggest thing for me.
Questions from the audience here? No? Oh, here we go.
I can't see everybody, so excuse me. I'm just going to pop over this way. I had a question for the caregivers. So I think one of the things I hear a lot is that it is a messy situation to be between family when they're talking about kinship care, that lots of people believe in placing with kin, but they're coming into it without all the context that you have, right? They're just like, they got called in, they get one side of the story. Sometimes they get 8 sides of the story. So what would you say to all the folks in the room about how to navigate that? About how to, sometimes I think they feel like a referee. So how has that been in your experience? What was useful when that was happening with you all, if you had that? Or what could you have wished someone would have done in those situations too?
Supervised visits with an outside party work for if you try not to get in between the stuff as much, you're going to get into it regardless, but it's what's best for the child. Being with family is what's going to be best for the kid overall. So trying to just kind of ignore the outside ramblings and think of a third party to help as much as possible for the visits and making sure that it's not necessarily adding more tension to the fire, I guess.
And like for me, my situation, and this is gonna blow you away. I have no supervised visits. And this is how you know when you really love your granddaughter, when you hear my situation. My granddaughter mother had my son murdered. So if I have enough grace and be kind to her in order for her to see her siblings, I don't know what nobody else can do. I don't mistreat her. I don't treat her any other kind of way. That's how much love I have for my granddaughter and understand what that means for her. That's still her mother. So I don't, and she doesn't even resemble or think that she don't even hate my mom. And she see how her mom talks to me, treats me, because I still need to role model that behavior, how she's supposed to treat every human being. So trust me, when I have to sit there and show grace, I think I implemented good.
Was the question towards like the workers? I guess I didn't understand the question.
Sorry, just that in your situation, was there anything that a caseworker did that was especially helpful in navigating those messy situations? Or was there something that you wish they had done?
Yeah, just uh, advice would be to just remain neutral, right? Which I know some of you probably already do, but yeah, just being able to hear from both sides, and understand, have an understanding or seek an understanding of both situations, would I think would be helpful, would be helpful in that situation.
Because even in my granddaughter's case, the caseworkers kept telling me because her case was so because of the abuse, they kept saying she can't never go back over there. And I knew mentally that was going to tear my granddaughter up. And I told him she got 6 other kids in the house. If it was that bad, why you didn't remove the rest of them kids? You're not going to tear my granddaughter up. So unless you remove the rest of them kids, it must be safe enough. They still there. She's going to see her mom. It's just going to be boundaries. You're talking to the wrong one. You're not going to socially mess my grandbaby up.
All right, last call. Last call. Any questions? Because it is 5 o'clock somewhere. All right, and I will pass it back over to Sabrina to let you know what's happening.
Thank you all so much to the panel. A big round of applause. And with that, it is lunchtime. Lunch is in the back. We will come back at 1 o'clock, but I'll give you all an update just so that we keep on a timely schedule. Thank you, everybody.
All right, welcome back. So we're excited to launch the afternoon of Kinspiration. Here is going to be a time to shift from learning to doing, from inspiration to action. So this afternoon is all about digging into the practical side of our shared priority here in Wisconsin, placing children with relatives or like kin. We'll begin with some brief framing conversations, but then really kind of break into groups. We don't have all the answers. You guys don't have all the answers, but hopefully together we can figure out those answers, like I said, together. So each kind of, again, framing the afternoon, each group will dive into discussion. We'll come back together and share some insights. And after that, you'll return to your agency teams. Hopefully you have somebody here. If you do not have your agency here, please feel free to join another agency and learn from one another. If time is tight, we might ask you to just schedule some follow-up meetings later on, but I think so far we're running ahead of schedule, and so hopefully we'll have enough time to do that. Then we'll close the day with some reflections and some next steps. And just as a reminder, Wisconsin prioritizes relative and like kin as the first and only placement for children. That means that as agencies, we have a shared responsibility to bring that priority to life in real, practical ways. With that said, we hope for a rich discussion and shared learning and collaborative planning, where you'll walk away with some tangible tools and strategies to move from intention to impact. We're going to start off with a quick activity. If you are anything like me, it's the afternoon. My belly is full. I've been up way too early. My caffeine is running low. So hopefully this can kind of get our brains buzzing and get things moving. And then we'll kind of get into some of that deep thought work. So passing it on to Holly.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so my partner in crime reminded me that perhaps this is a good opportunity. I'm talking about Brittany when I say that, that this is probably a great opportunity to sort of remind you, as you saw during our panel, that if you have folks that would be interested in joining our relative caregiver work group, we would love to hear from them. And, we're always taking, we've kind of changed our speed on that, where we're opening up recruitment quite often. So please contact me. I don't know if we can, Brittany, how did someone else pass my email out or in the chat? So, and a lot of you know me anyway. So please do let us know if you have anyone to recommend or have them contact me. Okay. All right. That was not scheduled, so. Okay, so before we jump into the agency action planning, that Alicia mentioned. We're going to do an activity where the incentive is that you may win a prize. So, all right. So what we did when you registered is ask you what the barriers your agency felt they experienced the most in regards to placing with relatives or like kin. So we ended up with 5 themes, and we want you to think about this. Let's first go through them, and then I'll tell you more about what the prize would be tied to. Okay. So we were told these are not in any specific order. Okay. Financial barriers, lack of resource. Folks mentioned that earlier. Basically, that the family needs more support than you feel your agency can provide them, and that is the barrier for that placement. Okay. And that could include things like daycare, which we know is a huge one, right? Licensing and system barriers, delays, all that red tape, the timing piece, ICPC delays, those sorts of things. Now, in many ways, I think that one also could tie back to the payments. Like some folks just cannot wait for 6 months to get paid, right? And in some cases, we know that happens with ICPC or with, of course, licensing. The family dynamics and complexity is what we titled this one. So this is really, I think, about some of, again, what we've been talking about, where relationships are very strained. There's anger, animosity, which we find with families. They've been together for a long time usually, and those patterns exist, old relationship issues. So there's also the trauma, of course. Let's see. So placements can feel difficult. And I think about what Robert said in the beginning. You think about connection versus convenience is a good way to think about that one. Okay, possibly. Number 4 was having difficulty, your agency having difficulty in finding a relative period, or finding relatives that you feel are eligible or safe, best interest. That comes up a lot. Okay, and I think there's one more. I think this one, not in alignment with the department and safety plans. I think this has a lot to do with the family not tying in or following perhaps requirements or instructions that you're giving them or that need to be followed. So it says example, not aligned, safety concerns, won't follow plans, more loyal to a parent than the child, for example. Those are all examples. So you should all have a handout to help you kind of, I just said a lot of things. So you have a handout that should help you a bit. And we can also come around if people need a little support or, but, oh, I'm so sorry. That was me. Oh, so we want you to shift from these barriers, right? These kind of blocks that we just mentioned that you told us about when you registered. To the solutions to those blocks or barriers. So right now we want you to think about, and it can be of your choosing, right? It can be a barrier, even if it didn't happen to be what you typed into your registration form. But we want you to think about that together. Is that 15 minutes? So sorry. Oh, so that's like a speed Jeopardy situation. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. So I guess what we want to hear from you is, what do you think? Do you have a solution turning around one of those barriers? Yes. Good, we have a couple already. It's very exciting.
Thinking about like that risk averse fear, like, do we have relatives? Are they appropriate? Taking the time to have the conversations with them, right? Like families, they're people, they have histories. We're also in the business of people can change for the better.
Yeah.
So being willing to slow things down, engage with them, have the conversation, explain what's going on, use that opportunity to share resources that could be supportive to them. So really leaning into that a little bit more on the front end. And even earlier we were talking about like when custody is taken, what time of day. We're very fortunate in Milwaukee County to be part of an access pilot where we have a different response time and where we can be more thoughtful about when we're making contact, ensuring that families have an opportunity to come forward, to be present, to intervene, to show their commitment to their families, rather than us just responding in the midst of chaos in the middle of the night. So really using the time to start asking the questions and engaging.
It's a great process. I heard communication, engagement. I think you win a prize.
Win a prize.
I saw a couple more hands. Yep, you're good.
I work in Washington County. I'm a foster care and kinship care coordinator, and I primarily license our relatives. And so far, every relative I've licensed, there's always messiness within the family between parents and the relative. And I try and warn them ahead of time. Right now, it may be okay. Like, we appreciate you stepping up, but it will get messy. And like, how do we prepare for that? And like, how do we navigate that? Because it probably will. And I just try and be very supportive, check in on them often, and try and be kind of the middleman so that maybe things are less messy or they can cope with it and maintain the placement longer.
Thank you.
I love that foreshadow, right? That foreshadowing of what's coming.
I think sometimes, like when a worker has working with a family for so long, that they can unintentionally create some own bias in their thinking and how they include family. And so I think moving more to a group decision-making model where others can put their input so that if you're too much into it, then we can create or reduce some of that bias and look at more relatives.
Yeah, that's great. Bringing the family unit, whether that's like kin or actual formal family, into the discussion as well as your staff. I think there were two here, Deanna.
I was going to say for questions 3 and 5, family teaming came up for me, and that's something we're implementing a model in Jefferson County that, like Jamie just said, brings everyone's voices to the table. There's no, secrets, and none of the plan gets agreed upon if it's not in alignment with the agency's idea of safety. So it kind of brings the best of all that.
This is our last tote gift bag.
I don't know if it's being naive, but in reading through some of the statutes and qualifications of getting licensed, realizing that people are having to pay for their own training is kind of a bizarre thing for me to wrap my head around. So I think like really targeting it, when you talk about financial barriers as you're even getting licensed, like how can you incentivize that? How can you even just get groups together where you're helping comprehension? Because even some of our parents and kin aren't comprehending and learning the same ways that our trainings are showing up. So
That's a good point. Is that our last?
So I think we do a lot with family find and engagement in Waukesha, but I think something that has come up for me is that if we were doing more of that at the time of placement rather than after placement has occurred, we might eliminate some of those other barriers once a youth is placed with someone outside of their family.
I like that. Policy isn't just about the requirements. It's also about looking at the coming to meet what the family and the children's needs are. Like we saw earlier this morning, time of day, looking at what is the need, what is the least traumatic. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Sure. So at Children's for number 1, we were able to get a grant, and we give kinship placements a Walmart and Domino's gift card when we initially go out to help them fill out the kinship application. And it's not much, but it really they feel really appreciated, and it's hopefully to get them until they get that first payment.
Right.
And then we've also had trainings with the child care department to really get those connections made. So if they do get denied or told they make too much money, we have someone we can email to say, hey, we're working with this person, and, can you get them their childcare? So
That's good. Advocating and having those connections where you can get that info.
I facilitate initial family team meetings at WellPoint for our cases that are coming into out-of-home care. And part of us creating or making that process better was in every single family team meeting, we talk about family findings. So we're asking right off the bat, for relatives, if we have the relative caregivers there, we're asking like what barriers there are, anything that we can help with right away. We're addressing, we're asking the ICWA question again and again right away. So we're trying to like get some of that right in the beginning because that happens right away within the first 45 days of the case coming to us.
Right. I think we're at the point where this was all excellent. It kind of got our brains moving in the bigger picture direction. So what we'd like you to do is if you're not already sitting with your team, your agency, or nope, I'm not doing this in the right order. Can talk, but apparently not in the right order.
No,
So sorry.
No, you're fine. So the intent of that activity was like, let's get our thoughts going, and we're gonna kind of dig a little bit deeper at our tables. If you're at a smaller table, I would really encourage you to kind of join another one. Later in the day, we will do exactly what Holly was talking about and focus more so on your agency specifically. So again, this next discussion is about shifting to taking ownership of change. We're not asking why, so we're not, identifying those barriers, but we're asking what can be done differently. You all have really great ideas of things that you're already currently doing, but we want to, again, dig a little bit deeper. How are we going to elevate the voices of children and families? How are we going to aim to move towards more connected, culturally grounded, and community placements from the very beginning? So again, here in this activity, goal is to move from intention to action, focus discussions through family and youth experience and equity, reflect not just on policy, but their overall experience. Before I get to, we kind of have an anchor question, but these are things that I'm going to want you guys to be thinking about and guiding some of those conversations, with the first being bias and disparities, right? So I think we've said a few times, Jamie, I think you talked about biases that we as workers might have at times. And so a few common biases about placing with relatives might include things like they're not stable enough. They're going to side with the parent. They're too old. They're too young. They won't cooperate with the system. These are thoughts that many of us have likely had. I know I, at some point in my career, have probably had all of them. We know that there's also that power in acknowledging your biases, whether they're one of the ones I just listed or if it's something else. And by doing so, it can really open the door to more equitable and compassionate decision-making and really center the needs and well-being of children and the parents that we work with. So kind of the additional question with that is when biases or disparities show up in decision-making, how is that currently addressed? What could your agency do different? Then there's also process and practice. So thinking about that from a sense of, in order to meet the vision of all children being placed with relatives, engagement must happen at onset. What can you do to change or prevent delays in relative and like kin placement? What would need to change within your agency for you to make relative and like kin placements default rather than the exception? I should say this is another handout on your table. I'm not asking you to memorize this. We'll also have, I think, a slide up there. Family experience. So thinking about how do the families that we work with currently experience, or how would they describe their experience with your efforts as a child welfare professional to find someone that they trust for their children to be with? What needs to shift to center their voice more? And then the last thing, prevention and early engagement. What would it take to identify and prepare relatives before placement is needed? So that anchor question that I was talking about, this is where the digging a little bit deeper, having that conversation at your table of what can agencies change to increase initial placements with relatives and like kin. So my challenge is, what barriers have led you to choose stranger care over relative and like kin? But I want you to flip that. What would it take to overcome or remove those barriers? So again, what would it take to overcome or remove barriers of placing with relatives and like kin? I want you to kind of brainstorm your ideas But then we'll also, again, create the space to hear from each table to identify one concrete change that agencies can make to, again, overcome barriers and increase initial placements with relatives or like kin. All right, so we're going to have until 2 o'clock, I believe, to kind of dig in, learn from one another, identify that concrete step that agencies can take.
Alicia, do you want to
Yes.
tell the folks online what they're doing?
Yes, so Sabrina has it set up. You'll notice a breakout session. I believe that you can choose. You want to come up and explain? That might be better. Sure. Yes. Yep. Yep. And so what you'll notice is that this first breakout activity will be kind of random selection. Otherwise, then you guys will break out into your agencies. So you back together. I heard lots of chatter. I'm sure connecting with one another, but also, solving world problems, right? Jamie. All right, so now we really want to just take some time to hear what you guys spoke about at your tables. I think we're doing good on time, so I would like to hear from, all tables. But Holly and I'll go around, and if you want to toss your hand up, we'll come to you and hear what your concrete action step is. Right. And don't. And we will just come to you because that's fun. I don't like when that happens to me, but I'm not beyond just showing up to tables either. So who would like to start? Good, Jamie. Since you wooed or whatever that was.
New, so sorry. So we really talked about getting family to the table in the beginning and having the parents be more a part of the conversation. So in Waukesha County, we started a family empowerment initiative. And in one of those, there's multiple components, but one of them is a family support meeting where hopefully we're doing it prior to removal, but when the protective planning phase to try to prevent removals and doing some family find work with the family, the parents, the children prior to the removal and getting those people to the table is what we've been focusing on. I mean, it's a work in progress, but we're getting there. There's not enough data to support anything yet, but we are seeing some positive data that we're hoping in the next year. We rolled it out last July. So our initial data is looking positive, but we're hoping to get some more soon. Yeah.
Cool.
So we took a youth justice perspective. And so an idea that we have is at the time an intake occurs, asking for 3 names of relatives like we would at the time of a removal in a Chapter 48 situation, so that even though we're not pursuing placement at that time necessarily, like we can begin to build the network around the youth, and then we have options if and when a need would arise.
I love that. I think we talked about that kind of earlier. I think it matches with what Jamie was saying of really kind of getting ahead of the game. And so, connecting youth or children with families isn't always about placement. It's about that connection. It's about that support. And, again, working. Okay. It may be able to from occurring, what sort of support build around what sort of support can we build around the family to, again, build those relationships, build those connections, someone to call in those times of crisis. I think anybody that either raises children or around children, any day can be a crisis, and having that support is just huge. So I love that you guys are thinking, ahead of placement. And especially when we're seeing on that board that Robert had shared with us, the number of emergency placements. And so again, what can we find in an emergency situation? Shoot, we have a whole list of individuals that we're able to connect to. So love it, love it, love it. All right, who's next? Ooh, we have people not making eye contact with me. Perfect, thank you.
Just to piggyback piggyback off of that, we were talking about maybe at the point of access. That's the first contact a lot of people have, you know, with child welfare. So having maybe reframing some of those questions to find out, you know, there's the question about who knows the family, but maybe digging a little deeper into that, you know, and then with regarding bias, we talked about having other team players from other divisions or other units come and sit in on staffings. And I think really it's just about a lot more teaming.
What might that question at access look like? Because that has always been there. And again, I'm gonna be vulnerable here. In times that I have filled out access or accepted access reports, I may or may not have skipped over that question or not given it the time, effort, and attention that it truly deserves. So what do you guys have any thoughts around what that might look like at point of access? What questions might be asked?
I think it's, you know, going to who supports the family. You know, you're asking who else has information about the family, but then digging deeper, like who else can be a support to the family. And if you know, if in a situation that the children do need another place to stay, or if there is a removal, who, you know, is there anyone that you can identify that would be, or have information about who could be a possible resource? I think really what it comes down to is being a lot more proactive instead of reactive.
Perfect. Thank you.
We talked about like the person earlier said being really proactive, but specifically after IA takes placement and then our agency has the case, how can we support the relatives and like kin between that moment and their kinship being approved? Because that can take a really long time for no fault of their own, whether they need, you know, someone coming to help open the PDF or helping them fill it out. Just those moments where we can maybe be offering more support so they can get financial funding.
All right, anybody over here? Thank you.
I don't know, as you mentioned the access reports and stuff, I was just thinking of how I just discovered in one of my cases where there's like 0 parent information and with SACWIS on the kid. And I'm just like, what a simple step of even starting there of entering that information of like those core people, like your immediate family. So taking that extra step to clean those up, our favorite.
Yeah, I think there's definitely tools that are available to us. And again, in that point of crisis, you know, sometimes we get overwhelmed, we get panicked, and we skip some of those pieces. And so how to really kind of lean into getting those forms filled out completely.
I think we just talked about like family teaming approach of really in instances where maybe we're blessed and have a lot of relatives or extended family that are interested and want to be a support, really leaning to them to make the plan instead of us taking, you know, our time and trying to figure out what we think is best for them, leaning to them.
And we're talking about engagement, right? So what it was in family experience, what is that going to feel like when we truly are creating the space where their voices are heard, and not only heard, but, you know, respected and sought after and looked at as the expert. What about these groups over here?
We talked about how our county is pretty good at like the initial onset in IA when there's a placement, a child going out of home, at, like asking the family for relatives. But even within a short term after that initial placement, if we have to use a foster home, then continuing to like search for relatives, which we do like through the Act 79 letter and everything, but like closer to the beginning of that, trying to do family find. That way a child doesn't stay at a foster home and get comfortable and then it's hard to remove. To place with a relative, we will hopefully find someone sooner and then can get the child moved sooner. So continuing the ongoing search for relatives at a faster pace rather than.
Thank you. And I think also with that, really being able to lean into what was true maybe at onset of the case or whatever point in the case might not still be accurate at all. I'm not sure if anybody has watched Sixto from Think of Us's TED Talk, but he talked about his experience in growing up in the foster care system. And, within one of his early plans, it said there are no relatives. And, as an adult, he learned that not only were there a slew of relatives, but some of his relatives were licensed foster parents for other children, and they were less than 60 miles away from the home that he was placed at. And again, I think that we all have been in a position where we read something, whether it be about relatives or whether it be about a trauma history or something, some sort of story or event that has happened, and we certainly take that as truth and continue that story long term. And what would it look like if we circled back to some of those conversations, and how might that impact the lives of children if we kind of re-ask questions that we've maybe asked before.
We have a chat question.
Perfect.
Or rather a share out. Avery shared that their group talked about how they could gather information around extended family members, and that one idea would be to complete an activity through a genogram or a family tree, but to also add in people who are supportive but not related. Danita's group shared that they discussed the family team meeting to outline supports for backup plans and successor guardians if moving to guardianship. That they also discussed family finding, Seneca searches, and using courts to require family to identify kin and kin-like.
I have another table over here. I don't know if
Wonderful.
you can hear me.
Through wraparound, we have families identify natural supports to be part of their team. Through family trees, we also have another kind of like worksheet where the youth identifies people. So like the little circles where it starts out with immediate family, goes to extended family, school supports, and then community supports too, like pastors, neighbors, coaches from recreational activities, things like that, just to get their minds thinking of all the people that they connect with on a regular basis.
We have a couple more folks sharing in from the chat. One group talked about how having supports for finances like Walmart cards, a food card, are the beginning of helping relatives, but ongoing issues with transportation or therapy for caregivers can be a barrier if there are past traumas with the caregiver and the parent's relationship. They also talked about how they need to better transitions from treatment offered by the county while children are still at home. That doesn't always transition if the children are being placed. And so having a soft handover of therapy from the county to outside services might help get the children home faster. One member of the group also worked with families while children are still placed at the home. So trying to support them from having to be moved being the best goal. Another group mentioned that that dedicated positions for family finding and family teams would be important. Rhonda's group talked about an eco map. And then another comment from Danita's group was that they talked about the ESSA and best interest from family court as factors in making placement decisions, as well as pushing ICPC assessments to move along.
All right. Any other groups that want to share? If you've even already shared, we're still would love to hear more. All right, we'll take the silence as those have shared. Okay. So moving right along, we're going to take some time. We're getting close to the end of the day. I know you're probably getting a little tired, and that's okay. But we want to give you guys some dedicated time. Again, we all recognize that, coming to events like this can be really exciting. It can be energizing. We appreciate the conversations. And sometimes we return to our agencies and, we've got 100 emails that we missed and 7 voicemails and all of those things. So we want to create the space for folks, if you're not with your agency tables, to get with your agency tables. And again, this is your time to talk through, like, what are you going to take away from today? What is something that kind of stood out to you? What are you committing to because of today? What support might you need, whether that be from your agency, from your community partners, from DCF? What support might you need from those individuals? So again, as a prompt to that discussion, really think about what barriers your agency specifically is experiencing making relatives the first call. Again, what can shift in your practice? What can shift in your mindset to remove those barriers? Again, similar to this conversation, but what are you specifically going to do differently after today? So again, the other thing to consider is, like, as you're action planning, consider the conversations that are happening with your bro coordinators in regards to implementation support networks. How might your action steps or support be in alignment with those conversations? It would be also super great if you guys could kind of schedule some time, schedule a meeting to have a follow-up conversation again once you're back to your agency before kind of wrapping up. And so then we'll again kind of just ask for agencies to report out. Again, what is your concrete action step for your agency specifically? What are you going to do differently, or what are you going to take back to your agency as a lesson learned from today? So we'll give everybody until about 2:40 to have those conversations, and then we'll bring you back together for another share out. All right, everybody, we're going to bring you guys back together. Thank you so much for grabbing a snack and coming back. All right, everybody, we're going to bring everybody back together, and this is going to be the time to hear from, we're just going to go table to table and hear what your plan is. So I'm going to start over, I think I'm going to start over on the left side of the room and go from there. I think Holly's going to have another mic, so maybe we'll ping pong back and forth together. All right, I'm going to have this table over here start. Who wants the mic? I'm going to just give it to somebody. You guys are going to play hot potato. Oh, well, okay. You guys can figure out who is going to talk. You got it this time.
So we really talked about putting Family Find in the very beginning. So like even at the point of access of asking for some relatives, and I'm pretty loud, asking for some relatives at that point, even like at juvenile intake and stuff, even if we're not looking for out of home or we don't even think it's going there yet, just to have that there. And then having our Family Find worker working alongside access and initial assessment to identify some of those supports right away, even if they're coming in to like help safety plan and be part of the solution.
What is your first next step?
Talk to our juvenile intake and our access workers to identify when they can pull in Family Find and like the questions to ask at that initial, and then go from there. We just need the supervisors of those other areas because they're not at the table today. Although they might be on there. I'm not sure.
I'm from Kenosha County. We have a brand new supervisor position that is going to be over both CPS and ongoing. to kind of bridge the gap between the initial point of contact with the family to connect the two units, because sometimes it gets difficult to do the handoff really well, and then to hopefully that person can be key in helping to push along some of these best practices for kinship and like kin that are kind of new opportunities. So
What's that next step?
to meet with that supervisor and to try to create a game plan to kind of connect both units in a way that's going to support this.
All right. Who got, and you even had your finger to your nose. Oh, peer pressure.
Someone had to go. We talked about two things. So we have family teaming in Jefferson County now, and Samantha and Andrea are kind of spearheading that. But that role is also taking over the family find. And so we talked about like a referral process from like ongoing and intake workers for getting that family find going in a way that's organized, but also gets done maybe quicker. And then for the support for relatives and kin providers, getting a support group up and running, but also like having ongoing workers and intake workers like providing information about that group as a, this is how we support you as a relative provider, and then that's what they know going into it, because right now we have an issue where relatives don't always jump on board or want like respond when we're like, hey, let's get this group going. So if that's all they know is that there's a support group, then hopefully they'll get involved right away versus the delay in trying to get them interested.
Awesome. Thank you.
What's your plan? All right. Excuse me.
Hi, our table's from WellPoint, and we talked a little bit about the Seneca reports, and when we get those back, we're only sending to first-degree relatives. And with the like kin expansion, can we relook at then taking that out to the second-degree relatives to hopefully get a bigger pool, basically?
Does this table over here want to go? Do you guys?
We talked about on the front end and initial assessment, engaging and vetting fathers better as well as paternal relatives. Sometimes there can be, turmoil between parents, and there's perhaps a reason why the father isn't involved or alleged father, but still using that time during initial assessment to engage paternal relatives.
What's your first next step?
Talking with our different bureau leaders over access and initial assessment and see if they have explored this at all and how we can, develop some next steps for implementation.
Thank you.
We talked about one doing kind of like family find stuff earlier, but we also talked about revisiting resources with the caregiver and offering to go with. I have a grandparent that I'm working with right now that is taking care of her grandson, and she's kind of been resistant to trying out different resources. She feels like a lot of obligation to take care of him without using those resources. And I think part of it is like pride and maybe too like that she hasn't had to use those resources before. So, maybe some anxiety about going. So really like offering to go with,
really explaining like what to expect when engaging in those resources, and things like that, just to like ease any anxiety or eliminate that barrier. Yeah, so the next action step, yeah, would be that.
Great. Yeah, I love that idea of being able to walk alongside of families. I think, and anything new or different or something we haven't experienced can provoke anxiety. I personally prefer to send emails or send text messages versus pick up the phone to schedule even my own doctor's appointments. I'd prefer to do that. And I'm typically pretty comfortable in most things. But again, those experiences are new for the families that we work with. And what we talked earlier about, like, what is their experience with us like? And so, again, having that comfortability of somebody, going alongside of us would be, I think, really impactful. So I love that. Holly, did we miss any tables? I've lost count now.
Here. Oh, looks like we might have something on the Zoom chat.
Folks in online echoed a lot of the things that have been shared, but they also talked about discussing beefing up kinship support group using a team approach to get names of relatives and like kin for placement, Seneca searches, and using support staff to run those background checks. They also discussed getting permanency roundtables started again, even if it's just internal staff doing it rather than at the state level. Although some folks from other areas mentioned they were still doing them in different ways or at different times. And yes, a lot of love and discussion of those permanency roundtables.
Great. All right. I had something I was going to say. It's escaped my mind twice. Both times it popped up. So maybe it'll pop up and I'll add it in there. But all right. So going to wrap up for today. So as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you, truly for the energy, the honesty. You guys brought some heart into the space. This event, Kinspiration, was never meant to be just a moment. It was meant to spark something, a shift, a deeper commitment to doing this work differently together. And we heard some powerful stories from our lived experience panel, shared ideas, hopefully walked away with some tangible tools that we've learned from one another. But honestly, the real work happens when you guys take it all back to your agencies and your communities. We're not asking you to do that alone. And that's where the First Placement Project comes into play. I mentioned it at the start of today. I'm going to mention it again because it's something you're going to want to be a part of. So again, this is your next invitation to put ideas and the values we explored today into motion. This isn't an initiative. It's not a policy update. It's a practice shift. So what we want agencies to do is, focus on what we could do different in our own local communities. It's an opportunity for your agency to select and try out a new strategy while also being supported by DSP and being aligned with what we know truly matters, which is relationships, belonging, and family. So there's a little bug up here. As I mentioned in the opening, this is a statewide initiative. It invites local child welfare agencies to join and improve initial placement with relatives and like kin. Prep work will begin in 2026. Will begin in this fall, I'm sorry, and with implementation in 2026. The focus is being part of a statewide community, change makers, working together to elevate really what refines or elevate and refine what works. Whether your idea is a small procedural shift or a big innovative point, the point is to try something new. So what is DSP going to do with that? We're going to support. We're going to provide some data monitoring. We're going to provide connection to other agencies. Also part of this, all aimed at making placement with kin the expectation. So look out for more details. They'll be coming out. We have some info sessions coming up. Again, these are going to come out in email, but please just kind of throw them into your calendar now because, again, we know how busy summer gets. They are going to be optional. There's no registration required. but it ultimately would just give you the opportunity to learn more about the projects. So when you return to your teams after today, please bring the stories, the vision, and the challenge of today with you. Let's take today's inspiration and turn it into a lasting change for children and families. Thank you all, and safe travels home.